Welcome back. On this episode, I'm chatting with Andrew Pudalov. Andrew is the CEO and founder of Rush Bowls, a concept that started in Boulder, went across the nation in over 24 plus states, 50 locations plus. Andrew has built something really, really special. And along the way has tried really cool different strategies to get in front of customers, whether it's wholesale, social media, franchising. He has a lot of experience, and this episode gives us a look into the journey of Rush Bowls and where it's headed. I hope you enjoy. Andrew, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. So nice to be here.
Likewise. You're a hard guy to get in front of the mic, but I'm so glad to have you on here. We have so many things that I wanted to talk to you about, especially around the growth of Rush Bowls and where you're taking the business. I think for my audience, I think it's good for the folks that haven't heard about your brand. I think it's good to take a step back. I want to hear about how you got into the industry because I think it's a bit non-traditional, and maybe walk us through like the impetus behind the idea. What sparked Rush Bowls for you?
Well, digressing back, I was global head of fixed income derivative trading in New York City. I was deeply impacted by 9/11. I was living in New York City. My wife was in the tower in 93. Most people don't realize 9/11, it was the second time they bombed the tower. It was her first day back from maternity. She was in the 20s. I was in mid-10, and she literally saw the plane crash in. And some of my good friends, one in particular, jumped, and it gave me kind of a solemn rethink of my life and what I wanted to do going forward. I was successful in the training arena for many, many, many years. I worked at Bear Stearns, Morgan Stanley, Credit Lyonnais, was global head for National Australia Bank. I knew personally I was near the end of my shelf life doing that business.
Right.
You don't do that business really when you're old.
For too long.
Too stressful. Yeah. But it gave me great training to do something that I wanted to do. And I'm a bit of a foodie. I wanted to move to Boulder, Colorado. That was really the impetus of everything. I wanted to move to Boulder. I had it in my brain as a young person for whatever reason. I can't even tell you why. I love the West, and I thought it was a great spot to be in the West. But one thing I really missed working in the financial industry, especially doing what I was doing, is the interaction with consumers. It's really mine, yours. It's extremely curt language.
Right.
And it was really between an open box between other traders, very limited with the salespeople. And I wanted social interaction. And then I was kind of offended living in New York City. And again, we're going more than 20 years back when the options were hot dog, grilled cheese, pizza, right? You had no healthy options at all. And that was the standard. So I moved to Boulder, Colorado, and wanted to start my own business. I started Rush Bowls, and the real focus was health and wellness, which is to this day is our focus. And also, when you start in a college community, and we're the first store, which is still open today, more than 20 years after the first opening, was really college kids in particular, I think, are more adaptable. They're more apt to try new things than a more mature community. So it was very purposeful to enter a community. Also, when I went to college a million years ago, there was no real health food. I felt that
it didn't exist.
It didn't exist. And 20 years ago, it didn't really exist either to any significant form. And that gave birth to this business. And I right away didn't want to do smoothies. We do smoothies, 20% of our business, but I wanted to be meal focused. I'm a big texture guy, and I wanted to try different flavors and do different things. And that's gave birth to Rush Bowls. Right away, we were doing bowls, and I was trying new flavors. I was talking to consumers. And step by step, slowly, we built the business.
Right. I love that. And I think Boulder is, like yourself, I had a phase in my life where I thought I wanted to live in either Denver or Boulder. And so I went out there and gave it a shot. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough for me to convince me to move from San Francisco, especially being in tech. This is the place to be. But When I think of Boulder, I do think of there's a stereotype of people that everyone is either hiking, running, doing some sort of outdoor activity. So I think it was a good training ground to pilot this new concept. And when did you start to see that you actually landed on something that could expand beyond that small college town?
That's the thing that, well, two things. When did I actually land that I thought it was a viable business? Wasn't right away either.
Yeah, that's a good question. When when did you know this was a good business?
Months into it, when people reordering,
Mhm.
they were getting it. This was a meal. This is, our biggest time of day is noon, right? So people are eating it as a meal. And people really love the texture. The texture of the granola and honey and all that stuff wasn't done. Like people didn't know about it. So a big part of my business, which generally, if you're starting a business, it's a good educational thing, is you never want to be in the education business.
Mm.
Unfortunately, I was in the education business, and my previous career, I wasn't afforded that much creativity. And this was a real creativity outlet for me to try different things, unique flavors and unique choices. And basically, I would say probably a year into it, I knew that I was onto something big.
Nice. What came next? When did you guys open up the third store? What was that growth like for
Well,
you at the early
yeah, the
days?
early days, we went into wholesale.
Mm.
So I went to a CPG. So we worked to deal with Whole Foods, and we were in 40 states with Whole Foods with frozen bowls.
Okay.
So we didn't start in four. We started in one store on
Right.
Pearl, and people were ordering it, and got really popular. And I really played with packaging back in the day, and it was creating unique packaging. At the time, and it sounds really trite, but at the time, no one was doing any label on the lid,
Mm.
and no one was doing black on a black shelf.
Mm.
Because conventional wisdom, that black would not stand out on a black shelf in a supermarket. And
I see.
we ignorance is bliss, I guess, but it was not being done, and I did it, and it really stood out. Then grew slowly but surely. We're in 40 states. I had co-packers making it, and then we got in like HEB, a lot of the Midwest stores, and then Costco region, certain Costco regions, and
Mm.
actually even Sam's Club wanted us in their stores, but we thought it was probably too high of a price point at the time to really gather enough customers that it made sense to roll it out to all the Sam's Clubs.
Right.
And unfortunately, after doing that for almost 7 years, my co-packer goes out of business overnight, and it's 12 brand. He's producing 12 brands, closes the facility down. He gets arrested for some crazy thing, and then no one could get their stuff out of there. So he basically destroyed 12 brands overnight. And at the time, I was convinced start thinking about franchising. So in 2016, I was already rolling into franchising anyway. It would have been nice to have both. Matter of fact, right now we're thinking of expanding into more CPG because we're a health and lifestyle brand, not just Rush Bowls. Yeah.
Explain that to me. When you say your health and wellness and lifestyle brand, what do you mean by that?
So obviously we focus on bowls and smoothies, but we create our own Rush Bites, which are freshly, we grind our own peanut butter in store and make bites out of it, which are rolled in oats and coconut, and they're all different varieties of them. But it's really fresh, and as you hear the noise in the background, it's the peanut grinder rolling. We even our peanut butter and jelly bowl, we make our own jam using chia seeds as a thickener. So real more health and wellness focus. But above and beyond that, you know, we're working on different new products for CPG, really more partnerships with other companies that are in similar spaces but different to expand our brand and really grow, and then eventually probably go into some sort of apparel arena.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. The goal is, I mean, depends on the operator, but the goal is to get, in my opinion, is to impact as many lives as possible and to get as many eyes on your product as possible. And you can go about that in different ways. You can franchise and open up, locations across the US, or you, as you were deciding to do at the beginning, was going to CPG because this is a product that can sell really well in the retail shelves and get the eyes on Rush through the retail outlet. And another way is also, which is a bit more, I think it depends on the type of business you run, but if you open up independent stores and you keep the business corporate owned the entire time and you grow a little bit slower that way, but you get to have more control over the final product. So there's, in my opinion, there isn't really one size fits all growth strategy, but for you, you went first CPG and then you decided to franchise. What was that process for you like when you finally did decide to franchise? Who was the first person you sold to, and like what had to be done in order to get that side of the business up and running?
It's kind of, this part of the business is really fun because running a retail store, creating a CPG business, and franchising they share the name, but
Right.
distinctly different
Right.
businesses.
Right.
And, I like different businesses and different things like that, different challenges, honestly. That's what gets me excited, right? Getting back to your question, franchising, I built an incredible foundation. Unlike, I think, almost every company out there, I own the business. I'm not funded by private equity. All our competitors are controlled pretty much by private equity. Our focus is really caring about the franchisees, picking partners, and not taking advantage of them in any way. Most companies in this arena, they'll make a percentage on food, they'll make a percentage on the equipment. We don't do
Right.
that. Anything
Right.
is rebated back to the franchisee. But anyway, the legal aspect of franchising is quite a challenge.
Yeah, I'm sure.
There's so much to it. Also, our philosophy was very different. Most people do super regionals, meaning that they focus in one community
Right.
and they just build from that one community. I, in my infinite wisdom, did not want to do that, with good reason, though. I really understood distribution. And I knew that if we built a really strong, incredibly complex, but incredibly educational foundation, that we could open and set little posts in a lot of different areas. Right now, we're in 24 states. So,
And how many locations in total?
around 55, we have 20 opening now,
Wow.
this year at least. So,
Wow. You
you
are
know,
very contrarian. 24 states and 50 locations. How do you manage it?
yeah.
What's the infrastructure behind that? That seems very
The
audacious.
we use, yeah, a lot of the challenge why companies don't do that is they don't really understand distribution that well and can't get really good product there at a very reasonable cost basis, basically. I knew that from the wholesale business. I
I
really
see.
knew that, and I focus on that. I also, since bowls are such a new kind of phenomenon, it doesn't sound new now, but it is a new phenomenon when it comes to food. I wanted to put little locations so people really understood the brand. So the brand had a lot of value and they knew that they're not going to be cheated with like sorbets, like a lot of the like playas of the world sold sorbet and sugar and juice, opposed to real health and fruit and vegetables. So getting back to that is making sure you pick the right partners right away, making sure your legal work is really comprehensive, and most importantly, you can replicate it at the same quality levels. So I opened another corporate store to make sure everything was dialed in, and then we started franchising and eventually have another corporate store. But we really felt that the growth by franchising really be exponential and help get the brand out there. And it's worked.
Nice. And how has what is your criteria when deciding to bring on a franchisee? What do you look for? What is the discovery? If you do any discovery days, what does that look like? What is the gut
No,
reaction that tells you this is someone I want to work with?
it's pretty hard to figure out. We do discovery days, and there's a lot of intense questioning
I'm sure.
from them and from us. We want good partners. And since I came with no food background and there's no hoods, there's really no cooking. You want people that are savvy business people that are not afraid to reach out into the community. So some of the things you look for is their social interactions, they acumen on business. What have they run before?
Mhm.
We turn a lot of people down, and it's not they could be incredible franchisees, you just don't know. But I feel that we try and pick the best of the best and because we really view it as partnership. you know, Private equity comes in and they're like, okay, do this and do that. And they don't care about your success or failure. in many of them. They're going to repackage it and sell it again. We do, there's not a million owners. I talk to every franchisee. If there's an issue, I get involved right away. So you try to have it as win-win for everybody as possible without forcing the franchisees to get all these fees involved. We really limit it. I negotiated a lot of the contracts, and I'm not easy with that. So I really care about the franchisees, and they're our partners. So you can't bite the hand that feeds you. You got to work with the hand that feeds you.
Right. I can sense, and rightfully so, I can sense a bit of hesitation around private equity, right? From our conversation, I think what I'm getting at is if done incorrectly, private equity can strip a lot of the ethos, a lot of the care, and a lot of the respect from a brand. I also do have a different perspective, and maybe this is me being naive, but I have seen some private equity partners that focus on the restaurant industry and can be very good stewards of the brand even after the founder decides to exit. What would you say your sentiment around private equity is? And I encourage you to be blunt with me because I can sense that you have a lot of passionate things to say about that front, coming from finance.
I think there's some good people in private equity, don't get me wrong. They're a for-profit business, as we all are.
Right.
It's the same thing if you're a stockholder in equities, right? So is a company private or is it publicly traded company? They're there to please the major stockholders at the expense of a lot of other things. I think a lot of private equity, a lot of private equities trying to please their stakeholders, not the franchisees. And that's traditionally what has happened many, many times. Now, that's not 100% of the time.
That's right.
At some point, I'm sure I'll have private equity in, but I'm going to be pretty picky on who I have in there. Fortuitously, I haven't needed it. I funded everything.
Right.
So, franchisees also can take comfort in that, knowing that you put your money where your mouth is. I've run the stores from day one. And, I know the challenges opposed to someone coming in, hey, do this. I've never run a store. I'm 25 and I just got out of school, right, in a way. So I've had multiple careers. I understand success of business and I understand what it takes. That's missing a lot of times. Not all the time. Sometimes it's a massive benefit, but I think more than it is. It's not more than it is because it's about return. It's 2 to 3 years on many of these companies. So they don't hook it by crook. They got to kind of glue it together, repackage it, and resell it.
Right. Very,
so very,
like very quickly. Yeah. Like hot potato.
Yeah,
very,
hot
very
potato.
quickly. And you make decisions in the short term, right? Looking at what would increase the enterprise value as quickly as possible. So you're able to repackage it, like you said, and sell. The thing with my show that I try to really focus on is I care less about what is the right answers to a specific problem for an operator. I care more about how does the operator view their business, what makes them unique, and also how do they kind of define growth and what's their goals around their brand. For you, what fascinates me about this conversation is that we have this mentality in Silicon Valley called founder mode, where the founder comes in and even if the company has been around for like 10, 15 years, the founder is still very much involved in the day-to-day operations and the rest of the team can feel it, right? The rest of the team from the entry-level employees all the way to the executives, they can see their presence. And I think for a lot of restaurants, you can sort of feel when the fire has started to ignite, right? And it started to dwindle. What keeps you motivated to keep going after all these years? What would success look like in your books in a few years from now?
Keep in mind of my background, I was in trading, global head trading, institutional, so large. So I was always betting on myself, right? And taking large positions on behalf of the bank, but not brokering. I'm actually taking the positions on behalf of the bank. So it really gave that entrepreneur, mindset, right? If I fail, and most people fail, it's one of those few industries, not a lot of people are good at it. I think between the good and the bad is 5 percentage points, like 55% to 60, you're great. Under 55%, you fail. You're out of a job. I view the same way in Rush Bowls. I like to be challenged. We're a very innovative company. We're small. Our square footage is smaller than most of the other stores out there. we're in, out. But there's so much has changed within the industry. I created it 20 years ago. It didn't really have a point of sale system of any significance for small companies. Then you had, other brands now that do that. Distribution is a different game now and it has its challenges. At COVID, we were one of the first companies to switch to all domestically oriented packaging way before anyone else because I had a really strong sense of what was going on in the world and the dangers of that. So that keeps me going. Being in, like we just launched Revivers. We're working a big partnership on something that hopefully I'll talk about on another show of yours. But that stuff always looking forward, always solution focused. That keeps me going. But again, at some point, there's probably a different guy to run this from 200 stores to 1,000 stores.
Right.
In my life, I think there's very few people that could run from zero, a founder-led business to a mature business and really mature business, as one leader. I think it's good to get different points of view. And at some point, I'll probably be chairman of the board and there'll be a different CEO in here.
What is your team like? Who do you have surrounding you?
I have a lot of people that have been with me for quite a bit. Head of sales, most of them, not most, significant number of them have worked a store.
Okay.
So it's almost a feeder program. And whether it's 10 years ago, it's really interesting to pick from those people because you really have to handle a lot of different complexities. It may be food, but you have to be able to multitask. You have to deal with the consumers. You have to be innovative. You have to see what's working, what's not. And store environment like that, it's a good telltale sign of success and failure for this particular career. And it was been a good feeder because if these people have worked for me for a while, I know their strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
And we're always supporting that with really good people that we feel are a good fit and within the organization. And we're adding too. So probably our next thing we'll add a little bit, some more gray hair. This mine's coming in nicely, but add more gray hair to the business just to have another set of eyes if I'm out or different perspective. So I think it's just having young and old, though a lot of like marketing, a lot of social media, a lot of that is more young focused in terms of people that have done it for a while may not have the added value they had.
Not anymore,
because things are
especially
changing so
not anymore.
fast.
Absolutely, especially now. Maybe a couple of years ago, you could get away with running the same playbook. Things have, with generative AI and short form content, things have completely flipped on its head. And you need to be on the pulse of things and hire young talent that's playing with those tools and understands where the consumer lives and where they, spend time. For your business, what is the demographic breakdown of the types of customers that walk into your door? And what types of channels do you use to reach them?
Demographic is, interestingly enough, almost evenly split between men and women. And from teenagers to probably 50-year-olds, that's expanded over time.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be, say 30-year-olds. Now it goes skewing higher and higher just because we've been around so long. But not only that, people are more used to the bowls. When I launched the wholesale company, especially in the Midwest, people weren't sure what mangoes were. And you would get the question, what's a mango, right?
That's
now
crazy.
it's all conventional.
Right.
Or we have organic hemp granola, and people were very concerned about hemp.
Right.
For the obvious reasons, when it's nothing to do with hemp seed is really nutritious. So understanding all those factors, but then also when you take that into account, how do we reach people that are, I would say, focused on our demographic is through all the different mediums, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, whether it's whatever these different platforms are, short form videos. There's always more, everyone's attention span is shorter and shorter and shorter. I think the fascinating part of this is I was, and remember the early web days, the internet days. And there's a parallel to that, to where we are now. I just think AI is going to be that much more powerful and explosive. But going back to when they launched the internet and all this, it was all over the place. People didn't really know. There's some lost leaders in it. a MySpace like that, how that kind of AOL, all those companies that weren't
Didn't
on
hit the
solid
mark.
footing.
Right.
Yeah.
But definitely
I think
set the
we're in that
trends, set the
now.
trends. They set the trends and they've de-risked what now, Instagram and Facebook has become. So it takes some
And
time.
who knows who it will be also,
Right.
I always laugh because Sears was the leader. People don't know that Sears was Amazon, right? In
Right.
many ways. And they totally failed. So, who's going to be that lost leader going forward, who to really invest in, but who to really sell your product and where. And what's it going to look like 5 years from now? I
Right.
think very different.
If you had to place a bet on how the restaurant industry is going to change in the next, let's call it 5 years with new technology, where would you place your bet?
Well, I will tell you where I think it will go. I think we're a ways from robotics, but I do think smaller square footage, more joint ventures. So I think Darden Foods was really interesting when they had the Pizza Hut next to
Right.
Nathan's Hot Dog next to whatever it is. I think you're going to have more and more of that with food court S scenarios or no seating
Mhm.
and just more and more delivery. People want ease. I think packaging will change too. And whether it's drones dropping off your food, I think you're going to see a different kind of outlet on that regard too. In terms of POS systems and this and that, I think that will be more advanced. People probably won't have the system be all online. QR codes, whatever it will be ordered that way. I would say we're 10 years away from any sort of real robotic involvement in it,
Absolutely.
at least.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the stuff I see here in San Francisco with my peers who are building in robotics. There is a data problem. There's not enough data to go around to power the training of those robots, but it's getting to a point where it's getting very exciting. And I think the restaurant industry is usually one of the last to adopt new solutions. But in the case of labor issues, in the case of customers wanting more and more convenience and speed, I think robotics is gonna be a no-brainer when it's finally ready.
I think there's two things to go on that, really, because you can almost make the other argument that AI is going to take those kind of jobs, the medium jobs, and there's going to be a lot more cheap labor for working the stores. And I think where the robotics come into play is I have elderly parents. It'd be amazing for them to have a robot live with them and really help them.
Right. Right.
I think there's incredible value there for safety and other reasons to have robotics. You're right. I think margins in food are really tricky, right?
It is.
Especially nowadays when labor went up a lot, food costs without tariffs even went up tremendously. Distribution is a headache for the most part.
Right.
And the work ethic isn't what it used to be, at least hypothetically.
That's true.
And rents are higher. So a
That's
lot
true.
of restaurants,
Across the
unless
board.
you're really efficient, it's a struggle. And if you're big brands like a McDonald's that you have to have lots of labor, it's a challenge. So,
Absolutely.
I think it's a good industry to be in if you can do it really efficiently, which we pride ourselves on, but it's a challenging industry. And I think there will be consolidation in that too, and it'll help the industry to be strong in the long run.
I agree. I agree. I think it's the margins have eroded so much that in the name of automation, the thing that's top of mind for a lot of people is how do we keep the hospitality and customers coming back for the experience. And I think we're going to have to get creative on that. We run a company where we do software for restaurants and we try to automate phones as an example of one of the use cases for our technology. And the thing that I'm really trying to make sure we do right is how do you not strip away that touch point with the customer from the hospitable nature of what it means to order food and go to a restaurant. So that's going to be a challenge. And I think in time, people should still feel good about going to a restaurant, whether it's the food that they eat, right, making them feel better in your case, or whether it's just the experience of like going into a restaurant, smiling at someone, getting good service. We're going to have to still maintain that, or else the cloud kitchens of the world are going to win and take over the restaurant
Yeah.
industries.
And they failed miserably initially, but I agree with you. We have to figure that out. We work on social interaction a lot when we open a store, and it's still a challenge because people want to like look, I created this whole business because I like that social interaction.
Exactly. That bringing us back full circle. You wanted to talk to people.
And people want to talk to people. And I will tell you, some of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life walked into that store and I spoke to them. One, a war photographer who was told incredible stories, some horrific, some wonderful, but you meet those kind of people that you can't get via, telephone or whatever it may be.
I agree. Amazing. Well, Andrew, congratulations, especially with being on the top 100 list. It seems like you guys are doing something right. And I love your style. I love your leadership. And I love the reason why you're doing it. I think it's very special. I wish you all the best. I hope to talk to you again, maybe in a year from now, to see where you're at.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. And hopefully I'll have something to tell you on some partnership we're doing too pretty soon. So
Amazing. Cool deal. Take care.
thank you so much. Great to be on your show.
Bye-bye.